Coming up, a strange tale on a documentary you won't want to miss. Just ahead. Hey you, thanks for making time, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Now. I'm Elliott Francis. I know you've been watching a lot of television, and why shouldn't you? They're calling it the golden age of streaming, but have you seen this docuseries on Max and ID Discovery? It's called The Curious Case of Natalia Grace. Now, it tells the story of a child from Ukraine who's adopted by a married couple here in the U.S., and what happens after that to her and her family. Make your head burst into flame. Take a look. The Curious Case of Natalia Grace tells the story of a young child from Ukraine who's adopted by an American couple, Michael and Christine Barnett. Within a year of her adoption, the Barnetts begin to suspect that 6-year-old Natalia, who suffers from a rare form of dwarfism, may in fact be a 20-year-old adult and not a child at all.
You want to have me give you one word that describes Natalia to me? Enigma.
In addition, the Barnetts claim that Natalia tried to assault them and their 3 other children. The pair petitioned the court to establish Natalia's real age, and the court agreed, legally changing her age from 6 to 22 years old.
It doesn't smell right. There's something wrong. Oh, it smells like shit.
Soon after, the Barnetts moved to Canada, leaving Natalia behind in an apartment in Lafayette, Indiana. Barely 3 feet tall and suffering from multiple disabilities, Natalia was unable to care for herself, and as a result, the Barnetts were eventually charged with abandonment.
If the jury looks at Natalia and her physical stature, they'll know she's an adult, but even as an adult, they say, but still, how can parents leave someone so tiny by themselves?
All of this and the unbelievable facts in the incendiary court case that follows is recounted in the 6-part series streaming on Max and ID Discovery. Attorney and former court TV reporter Beth Karas is the featured legal analyst for the series.
Everything in this case boils down to Natalia's age. Is she a child or is she an adult? Could she really have been born in 2003? How old is Natalia Barnett really? It's clear that the prosecution believes Natalia was a child when she was left alone to fend for herself in this apartment in Lafayette, Indiana. Getting her re-aged to an adult could have been a way for Michael and Christine to protect themselves from child neglect charges. There are 2 sets or theories of charges. One is based on Natalia being a child. The other set of charges is based on Natalia being a dependent with a disability. This is where Natalia's age becomes extremely important. If the prosecution can prove that Natalia was a child, despite her re-aging, it should be an open and shut case with any jury.
Joining us now is Beth Karas. Beth is an attorney. She is, of course, the featured legal analyst in the Curious Case of Natalia Grace and a former correspondent with Court TV, and joins us now to talk about this curious case of Natalia Grace. Beth, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. And that is a good title, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's what drew us to it, because okay, you're curious. We want to know about this as well. And we had heard about it through word of mouth. Of course, it's aired of a few weeks ago. It premiered, and of course, it's concluded since then. So I think people have had a chance to process all of this. What kind of reaction have you been getting from people about this?
Oh, I've been enjoying watching the Twitter feed, but people have been writing to me directly through my website, bethkaris.com, and asking questions. Very thoughtful emails that I'm getting, like one the other day from a emergency room ICU nurse who laid out point by point things that the family should have done, and why didn't they do this, and why didn't they look into that. And she's of the mind that Natalia was an abused, mistreated child, who was given up at birth and deserved better in life, and this family just didn't understand her. But not everyone agrees with that position. So there are people who write to me to tell me, I think she was scamming everybody, that she really is an adult masquerading as a child. So people are all over the place, but for the most part, the series has captivated the viewers because there are so many twists in this case. I mean, my head was spinning, and I went through the journey with the viewer because I sat down several times, for interviews, and I was only given information by the investigative team, the producers. I was only given information as they were learning it, but in pieces. Because my reaction when I'm talking on camera is very genuine. Like, I'm really surprised when they're telling me things that Michael said in 2022 that he is opposite what he said in 2019. I didn't know that when I had my first interview,
Sure,
so
right.
I was just going through the experience with the viewer.
Interesting. Let's talk about the timeline first of all, because it's very important, as most people recognize from watching the presentation, and others will find out when they get to it. She was adopted roughly in 2010, moved into her first apartment about a year later, and then her parents petitioned the judge to have her re-aged in 2012 or around thereabouts. The judge agreed to have her re-age, and instead of saying that she was 6 years old, all of a sudden Natalia was 22 years old, as decreed by the court. What is re-aging and how does that work? I'd never heard of that before.
So I was not familiar with it either, but as it turns out, re-aging does happen and is common in international adoptions because sometimes a few years are shaved off the age of a child being adopted because a younger child is, I guess, more attractive to a family who's looking for a child. So the re-aging does happen, but usually it's 2 or 3 years. 14 years is pretty incredible. But it happened. It was lawful. An emergency petition was given to a judge in Indiana in the summer of 2012 with an affidavit from the family doctor attesting to not noticing any growth for a number of years. And the judge came up with a formula. He said, basically, you stop growing at 18, although apparently not everybody stops growing, bone growth at 18, but many. So, you roughly stop growing at 18. She hasn't had any bone growth in 4 years, so I'm going to make her 22. But you hear at one point in the series, you hear a detective say, well, in Indiana, adoptive parents are responsible for the adoptee until the age of 21. So it's curious that it's 1 year more than it gets them out of their financial responsibility or whatever for the child that they've adopted, whether she's an adult or child.
The parents, Michael and Christine Barnett, the adoptive parents, said that the evidence that they used to bring this re-aging about was that they said they discovered that she had grown pubic hair and that she was having her period. It would seem that her condition, we should mention that right now, she suffers from a condition that is similar to dwarfism. If I can pronounce this correctly, spondyloepiphyseal dysplasia, which is a form of dwarfism, but it's so complicated and it's so rare. It would seem as if these things that they saw, which led them to believe that she was an adult, and other things too that we'll talk about in a second, were probably part and parcel of her condition in itself. Have you heard that from any doctors?
So, yeah, that is an explanation, and that's what came to mind for me too. Like, wait a second, you can't judge her like somebody who doesn't have a disability, and maybe her hormones are a little bit out of whack. I mean, I'm not a doctor,
sure,
but it is. Yeah, there may be an explanation. I mean, girls are menstruating younger and younger. If you eat foods like milk and dairy products that have a lot of hormones in them, apparently it's causing young girls to menstruate earlier. I'm not saying that's what happened to Natalia, but you cannot hold her to the same, same standards of somebody who doesn't have a disability like that.
Absolutely. You said you weren't comfortable with this whole re-aging process as an attorney. Why?
Because the judge did it based on an affidavit from a doctor. He did not hear from Natalia or a guardian ad litem, a person, a lawyer or some advocate appointed to represent Natalia's interests. So it was all one-sided. That's my understanding. The petition, this emergency petition to the court to re-age her, and that just didn't seem fair.
Natalia wasn't even allowed to testify on her own behalf, or was even in court when all this was happening, was she?
She didn't even know it. She didn't know about it. She had been hospitalized after what viewers may recall was the creamery incident, where Christine alleged that they were going to milk cows for one of the boys' birthday, that Natalia tried to pull Christine into an electric fence, which wasn't even on, we learned later in the documentary. And so she gets hospitalized. She's hospitalized for that. And during that time, or within a few weeks, they filed this emergency petition.
I should mention that I laugh because the story of the adoptive parents, and we probably don't have time for that. Michael and Christine Barnett is almost a completely separate story in and of itself. They're a pair.
Yes, and we learned throughout the series that Michael was putting all the blame for problems in the household on Natalia in his first interview in 2019, and was singing a very different tune 3 years later in 2022, pointing the finger at Christine. And lots of things changed, and that was like just one part of a major turn in the events for me, where I was like, what is going on here? I don't know who to believe.
Right.
I mean, Christine's version is coming from Michael, right? I mean, she didn't cooperate with this series. So what we know about her comes from him, maybe a few things the son Jacob says, and then maybe some Facebook or social media postings, a video, of audio recording. That's all we've got.
The Barnetts claimed they had to move her out because she was a menace, threatening to stab family members. I think at one point there was an alleged poisoning. You mentioned the electric fence, which probably or was not electrified. What kind of proof did the Barnetts offer for all this information that they say was necessary for them to move this young lady out of the house?
Their proof is their word, perhaps even attesting to it under oath, but it's their word. I mean, they didn't, I haven't seen any other independent evidence.
Right.
It's their word. It's their word against her word.
Right.
And when Natalia speaks, you gotta keep in mind that if she was a child, she may not have a great memory. Like, I don't know how much you remember when you were 7 or 8 years old.
Not a
right?
lot.
Details. Yeah, exactly. So, but if she was an adult, she should remember. So we'll see. When she speaks in a few months.
And we'll talk about that more in just a few seconds. I'm glad that she will get a chance to tell her side of the story. But eventually, within this documentary, 6-part documentary, The Curious Case of Natalia Grace, Natalia's birth mother, who still lives in Ukraine, was located. She was tested with a DNA test, and she helped establish her true birth date. Tell me how that happened.
Yes, the investigators for the Tippecanoe County Prosecutor's Office went to Ukraine in 2020. This is before the war, and they were able to locate her. They used Ukrainian investigator too. They found first Anna Gava's twin sister, who then helped them find her sister. And you hear, everything's recorded. You hear Anna Gava, when her sister's phone is on speaker, say, I've been dealing with this for 17 years. And of course, they use a soundbite from me in the series. I'm like, okay, this was 2020. Anna Gava just blurted out, I've been dealing with this for 17 years. Yeah. Natalia was born in 2003. I mean, if Anna Gava was faking it, like she agreed to a fake birth age, making Natalia younger than she really was, I don't know that she could think fast enough. She's talking to her sister. Did she know that, she was on speakerphone and other people were listening and it's being recorded? And, it just seemed truthful to me when she blurted out 17 years.
Yeah. The Barnetts eventually moved to Canada without Natalia. They get divorced. They're eventually charged separately with not child abandonment, but I think abandonment of a disabled person.
Yeah, actually, they were charged with both.
Really?
They were charged with both initially. They were charged with abandoning a child and child neglect, and mirror charges of abandoning and neglecting a dependent person, which doesn't matter the age, like a disability, somebody dependent on you. There were two sets of charges. The one based on age got dismissed because the judge said, I'm not relitigating the age issue. A judge in Indiana, not the same county, different county, but a judge in Indiana has found her to be an adult, and I'm not going to let the jury know age was ever an issue in this case.
Right, and the age that was established through the DNA and the investigative work with yourself and the detective wasn't allowed in court. Why?
Because the judge said, this has been already litigated and she's been established to be an adult, and I'm not going to reopen that can of worms, basically. It really hamstrung the prosecution because, as you say, they'd established the age. They'd established she was born in 2003. This is clearly child neglect. Like, abandoning what she would have been about a 9-year-old at that time. Yeah, she would have been 9. Abandoning a 9-year-old who also has a disability and is a little person in an apartment, the second apartment, where you had to climb 16 stairs. Like, what? Are you kidding me?
Right.
And so that's very different from abandoning a dependent who, she lived a year in that first apartment, which was a ground floor apartment, and they didn't have all that much contact with her. And I suspect that, jurors might have felt, could be a little reasonable doubt here because she did kind of live on her own.
It is just mind-numbing, though. I mean, we had to turn the television off for a second or put it on pause because we were just so incensed that. And I've covered a lot of cases. You probably have obviously covered more than I have, but I've always enjoyed covering court cases. So I've seen a lot of litigation go by, and it just drove me nuts that they wouldn't allow that information. The judge wouldn't allow that information in court. It was pertinent to the entire case. And even, if I recall, the jury foreman was interviewed in the piece and actually admitted that things would have gone differently had they known that information.
Exactly. And do you recall in the series when those video depositions were taken, when the doctor who was a specialist was like, X-rays don't lie, and it was Christine's lawyer who's doing the questioning. He's like, sir, she is an adult. That is the truth. He's like, wait a second. Aren't you interested in the truth? That's when he said X-rays don't lie. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, that one had me going because I hadn't seen that deposition before.
Right. That's just nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Is there any recourse for Natalia going forward in terms of jurisprudence? Can she sue the court? Can she? Does she have any options?
So I think there might be some options in the civil realm that are being explored. I don't know that there's anything more criminally that could be done because of statute of limitations. I believe everything's expired at this point. But there may be some things that she can do in the criminal sphere, in the civil sphere, that are being explored right now. But I'm not really privy to the details, but I do think it's being explored. She's trying to, her family, the family that's raising her and has been for years and embraced her and loves her very much, is also like trying to raise money to get a wheelchair modified, van for her because she's pretty much in a wheelchair now. So, there are things people can do to help, but in the legal system, I think that, there might be some things she can do civilly.
Let's take that re-aging thing. Can she be re-aged again to her proper age?
I think she could try. I don't know what the courts will do, but I think that she could try again. She did go to court, after she was re-aged in 2012, she went years later and tried to have it undone, and it turned into this mess where the judge basically heard some testimony and basically rubber stamped what the prior judge had done. So 2 judges in Indiana have determined that she's an adult. So I don't know what will happen if she tries to re-age again.
Is it possible to sue the court based on it's not
No.
It's not judicial misconduct, of course, in the true sense of the word, but everybody knows something wrong was done. Here.
Sometimes there's recourse if you find that a judge has abused his or her discretion, but it's a different type of proceeding. It's not something where you get monetary damages. You know, maybe she could have something undone, but I'd have to look at what Indiana procedure is. I'm a New York lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. It's all different
Yeah,
everywhere.
I didn't know that question was coming. Okay,
That's
Elliott.
okay. That's
So
fair enough. If you don't know, just say you don't know. It's okay. We don't
Okay.
know it. We don't know everything, and certainly different jurisdictions and handle it differently. So
right, but I can get back to you on that.
absolutely not a problem. Fair enough. Have you spoken with Natalia at all since the docuseries aired?
I have not personally spoken with her. The production team has spoken with her, and and I'm reviewing things that she said in preparation for Natalia Speaks. Yeah. And she had a lot to say. That's all I can tell you.
And this is a good time to talk about that. Natalia Speaks. It's a follow-up to the curious case of Natalia Grace. Talk to me about that, what you can tell me so far.
Sure. So this whole series was locked and delivered, and then the trials came up, or it was locked, and then the trials came up. And Natalia was not talking. I mean, she was abiding by the prosecution team saying, no, you can't talk. You can't give anybody any interviews. So it wasn't until after Christine's case was dismissed, which was just a couple of months ago, that she even agreed to talk. So we're like only having this opportunity to talk to her not long before the series aired. So nothing she said could have been a part of this unless we held the series for several more months and then waited to do the Natalia Speaks part. So we thought, no, I mean, it wasn't our decision, it was ID's, but
Sure.
Let's get it out and we'll do a follow-up. And so that's what's happening now. But she could not talk and would not talk, but she abided by the rules, that the prosecution and the judge set down.
In the little bit that we've seen of her post documentary, this first documentary, she appears to be doing much better. Am I far off the mark here?
No, you are on the mark. She is doing well. She's really with a loving family, and they have provided her with a safe environment, and she's thriving. Whether she's 19 or 33, I mean, she has a birthday on September 4th, and she's either going to turn 20 or 34.
Yeah. I hope she gets that all re-aged. A couple of things, and again, this may venture into an area that you're not familiar, so again, slap my hand and tell me if I'm off base here. But within the documentary, towards the end, there were a couple of loose ends that we thought, well, what the hell's going on there? What the hell happened? This guy, Freddie Gill, who's another little person who is interviewed towards the end, who I guess was a prosecution witness for Christine. He alludes to something that he knows about Christine. They get it on, they record it on tape. They're going to show it to her husband or her former husband, Michael, on a laptop. He looks at it. We, the viewer, don't hear it, and then the whole thing is shut down. Do you know what that was all about?
Yeah. So I never heard it, but people think that Christine told Freddie something that Michael had done, and it upset Michael. But clearly, it's not something that's been confirmed, and that's why we didn't hear it. It was just something that she said, which was probably pretty explosive.
Yeah.
And that's why Michael reacted the way he did. So I actually never heard it. I've been given information that they want, that I need, almost on a need-to-know basis for my analysis. But I don't have everything, and that is something that I don't have.
That's okay.
But I got all of Natalia right now. I'm watching all the Natalia interviews, so I'll be ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough. Christine's, and this was a shocker on the back end for us. Just learned that they were tried separately for the abandonment, Michael and Christine. Christine's case was just dismissed just this past March.
Yeah.
Did she?
Yep.
Let me ask the question, because I didn't ask the question. It's simple. Why? I have my thoughts, but I'm interested to see what you think.
So I've not spoken with that office, but my understanding is that the evidence is virtually the same. as the evidence against Michael.
Right.
And they lost that case, except Michael was subpoenaed to testify against Christine. But, maybe they think he wouldn't make a great witness, that he's made inconsistent statements, that he really can't be believed. So if you take Michael out of the equation as a witness against Christine, the evidence is going to be identical, right? Mm-hmm. And they couldn't convince 12 jurors. And with the judge saying you can't bring up age, they may have thought, well, we're not going to waste our resources because it's the same case and we just lost it.
So they still wouldn't be able to bring up age in this.
Correct.
However,
it was a ruling that was,
the jury pool could be a little different at this point, and in fact may have had the opportunity to watch the docuseries, which I'm sure they'll try and fetter out in voir dire, in questioning the potential jury. But
fair enough. Good point. Yeah, good point. But Christine's trial was set for mid-April, and this series would not have aired yet.
Right. Okay.
Right. So, if it had been continued and the series aired, then you're right. The jury would have been. But, when jurors are selected and if they've heard about a case, first of all, they don't get seated on a jury if they say, look, I have a strong opinion and I can't put it aside. Or they are told, whatever you know about the case, put it aside. You have to decide this case only on the evidence in the courtroom, and it would not have included age.
Yeah.
But it would be in the back of their heads, even if they said they could put it aside, right?
Yeah, in the back of their heads is just as good as the front of their heads in terms of a jury.
Right, maybe in the front.
So we yeah, absolutely. We can look forward to the second part of this. Is it the same production company doing this or a different production company? Same company. And that's scheduled to air this summer, later this summer. What do you know about that?
Yes, although I don't know the air date. That's up to ID because it'll air first on Investigation Discovery. All I know is they're saying later this summer. So I know everybody's working on it furiously right now. But as we speak. It's early summer, so I don't know the exact air date. No one's told me.
All right, fair enough. But for now, we will have to do with the curious case of Natalia Grace, which airs on ID and HBO Max, which is now just Max. So you can find it right there. Beth Karas, thank you so much for
my pleasure.
Your insight, your analysis, which we hope will soon clear up many of these issues for Natalia Grace. Be sure and check it out. It's called The Curious Case of Natalia Grace. All episodes now streaming on Max and ID Discovery. Well, that's it for this week's edition of Now. Remember, keep liking us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be back here next week for another edition of Now. Till then, take care. Peace.